morning, everyone, and welcome to the online service of the Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, a loving, spirited, and inclusive congregation. While our physical sanctuary is located in Port Townsend, Washington, our online community now extends throughout the region, the country, and the world, and includes you. We're so glad you're with us today. In a moment, we'll be lighting the chalice. You might want to get a candle and matches and light your own chalice to mark our time together. But before we get started with the service, let us take a few deep breaths to settle our minds and enter this hour with open hearts. It is good to be together. In recognition of Labor Day, we light this flame in gratitude for all the labors that support our world and for those who boldly continue the work of justice, equity, and peace. Our opening words this morning are by Reverend Kate Lohr. We join together in this sanctuary of vision and hope to imagine work that supports the well-being of all. We acknowledge that it is through our jobs, whether paid or volunteer, that we find meaning, purpose, and sustenance. But we also know that work can at times be demanding, demeaning, or can expose us to danger. This is especially true for our essential service providers who continue to work in person during this pandemic, including, now, our teachers. Yes, the back-to-school season is here. Many schools have already opened. Others, like here in Port Townsend, start this week. Some schools are taking place online, others in person, and still others offer a hybrid of these options. But regardless of the option chosen, one thing has become clear. Our teachers play a central role in the health and well-being of us all. And thus, our service today will focus on education and the insights gained by a former teacher and union leader, Gary Obermeyer. May our work and all work serve humanity and all living beings. And now I'd like to welcome Bo Olgren, who will share today's Story for All Ages.
Good morning, everyone. Today, Gary is going to be talking about his time as a teacher and his work reforming our education and teaching system to support our teachers best. This is really well-timed, considering the fact that many of our schools are opening up this week. And I know school this year might look a little different than years in the past. Some of us are homeschooling, some of us are doing in-person school, some of us are doing online school, some of us are unschooling, and some of us are doing hybrid models. And so I think it's actually a perfect time to talk about teaching and all the different ways that we are teachers and the important work that our teachers do in our schools, in our homes, in RE, and the really vital role that teachers play in our lives. Tomorrow, as many of you know, is Labor Day, which celebrates collective action and working together to make a difference for us all, particularly in our places of work. And so I thought it was a perfect opportunity to highlight a teacher, Dolores Huerta, who is an incredible activist and has done incredibly important work on behalf of us all. Dolores started the National Farm Workers Association with her friend Cesar Chavez and continues to be an activist even at age 90. So here is the story of Dolores Huerta. This is Dolores. Dolores is a teacher, but her students are too hungry to listen, and they are too sick to play, and they have no shoes to wear at recess. Dolores is a detective. She follows the kids home. She asks the parents why their kids are hungry and sick. She asks why their children don't have shoes. The parents say their bosses don't pay them enough money for good food or new clothes or a visit to the doctor. These parents work hard. They pick grapes all morning. They pick grapes all afternoon. They pick grapes until night. But they are paid too little, and shoes cost too much. Dolores is a friend. The farm workers tell her their troubles. They don't get fresh water. They don't get bathroom breaks. Their work is hard and worth more than what they are paid. Friends look out for each other, so Dolores decides to take a stand. Dolores is a warrior. She walks right up to the bosses. She asks them to give the workers rest breaks and to let them stay home when they are sick. She asks each boss to pay the workers enough money for shoes and books and medicine. They say no. The bosses say that if they give the workers more money, they will have to raise the price of grapes and then nobody will buy them. This excuse is not good enough. The kids still need food. The kids still need medicine. The kids still need shoes. Dolores is an organizer. She asks the people to strike. They will not work until the bosses start to listen. Instead of picking grapes, the workers stand on the outside of the farms. They shout, they sing, they write strike and si se puede on the signs they hold up high. Dolores is a storyteller. When the bosses won't change their minds, she tells stories that show why their farms are not a healthy place to work. She tells shoppers. She tells crowds. She tells television reporters. She tells senators, mayors, and governors. Many people listen. Some people don't. Dolores is a peacemaker. She doesn't use violence to make the bosses pay attention. She grabs them with her words. She encourages the workers to use their voices and their feet too, until the bosses change their unfair practices. Dolores is a mother. Changing the bosses' minds takes a long time, and she misses her kids. The mothers and fathers on strike miss their kids too. While some workers argue with the bosses, others watch the children play and keep them safe. Dolores is a woman. Some people think she should quiet down and let the men do the talking. Dolores just gets louder. She asks more women to speak up too. Their voices rise up together, booming over the farms, roaring into the cities, and rumbling across the country. Dolores is a fortune teller. She predicts the future. She tells the bosses that if they don't pay their workers well for their hard work, the workers will stop picking the grapes, and the grapes will rot. She tells the bosses that if people hear workers are mistreated, nobody will buy their grapes. All of Dolores's predictions start coming true. The farms become empty. The grapes are left on the vines. Nobody will pick them. Nobody will buy them. Finally, it starts to work. The bosses tell the workers that if they come back from their strikes, they can take rest breaks. The bosses will raise their pay. The workers will get the money to buy food, medicine, and shoes for their children. The workers are happy. But Dolores is not finished. Dolores is a hunter. She hunts for other bosses who need to take better care of their workers. Dolores tells them to listen, or else. Dolores is a teacher. She teaches people how to take care of each other. This is Dolores. May we all be appreciative for the roles that teachers play in our lives in their many different ways, and be thankful for the labor movement and for Labor Day tomorrow.
What I'd like to do now is acknowledge and welcome those of you who are visiting us this morning. I invite you to say hello in the comment section and tell us your name and where you're from. We'd love to get to know you better. And if you don't know how to access the comments, there's a little square symbol down on the lower right-hand corner of the screen. If you press it, it will take you out of full screen mode, making the comments section visible. We hope you'll join us also for our virtual coffee hour after the service. Just look for the link that'll be posted in the comment section at the end of the service. And if you find this service useful or inspirational, hopefully both, please share the link with your friends and family. So, welcome everyone. We're glad you're with us today. It's now time for the offering. Now that summer is over, we are returning to our regular routine of holding a hope offering on the first Sunday of each month. HOPE stands for Helping Our People Eat, and the proceeds will go to our local food banks. If you'd like to donate today, you have 3 options. First, you may text the amount you'd like to give to the number now showing at the bottom of the screen, or simply mail a check to QUF. Just remember to put HOPE in the memo line so your money goes to your intended destination. Or you may go to QUF.org and click on the word Giving. We will now gratefully receive your offering as we listen to John Hanson play The Best Is Yet to Come by Cy Coleman.
Thank you, John. I love it when you play for us. Now, I have a few announcements for you this morning. First off, I want to remind you that next Sunday is Homecoming Sunday, or in the case this year, our Stay-at-Home Coming Sunday. And what this means is that we will now return to our regular program year, in which our small groups open up for the inclusion of new members. Our religious education for all ages enters a new season, and I return to the pulpit on a regular basis. It's an important day in the life of the congregation, so I hope you'll join us. My second announcement is that our adult learning programs, ALPS, will be entirely online this year. Yes, that means that in order to participate in ALPS this fall, you're going to need to learn how to use Zoom. Now, if that sounds intimidating to you, please do not despair. Our tech specialist, Christina Tweed, is here to help you. If you haven't already done so, I'd like to suggest that you give Zoom a try by attending one or more of our virtual coffee hours that follow the service each Sunday. Christina is our Zoom master, and so she's there every Sunday to walk people through the ins and outs of Zoom, which, by the way, aren't as difficult as you might imagine, especially when you have someone there helping you out. And it's really best that you learn Zoom now instead of trying to do so on the first day of your ALPS class. So please, have faith in yourself. You can learn this new skill set, especially with Christina at your side. ALPS signups will begin next week for members and affiliated friends, and on the 20th September for everyone else. But if you'd like to preview the classes, you'll find the ALPS brochure on our website now at quuuf.org. Just click on the Adult Learning Programs tab at the top of the page. And lastly, a reminder. Because it's the first Sunday of the month, it's Selfie Roundup Day. So, before I share the joys and sorrows, here's a glimpse of some of our community members enjoying the last vestiges of summer.
Clouds are swift, rocks are ancient, mountains are high, oceans gray, winds are restless, trees are patient. You, my child, are awake. Waves are crashing, rivers churning, mountains twirling, stars ablaze. Storms are raging, atoms whirling. You, my child, are awake to perceive these wondrous things, to count the beats of a blackbird's wings, to tell a story and dance and sing. All the splendors of creation are very happy that you came, 'cause they needed someone to see them, and you, my child, are awake to perceive these wondrous things, to count the beats of a blackbird's wings, to tell a story and dance and sing. Seeds are hopeful, dewdrops fleeting, oak trees crooked, redwood straight, but they are not known to the sleeping. And you, my child, are awake. You, my child, are awake. You, my child.
It's now time to share our joys and sorrows. As always, we begin this ritual with the recognition that our personal joys and sorrows are only a fragment of the joys and sorrows of the larger community of life, and thus we place this first stone, thinking in particular of all those who suffer from the uncertainty, political acrimony, and natural disasters taking place these days. Surely, the year 2020 will go down in our history books as an especially trying year. May all this tumult catalyze the changes so badly needed right now. And now, within the congregation, we light a candle of memory in honor of Lavon Snell on the 1-year anniversary of her death. Her son, Ross, whom many of you know and adore, asked me to convey this message to you today. On the 1-year anniversary of Lavon Snell's death, her family wishes to express their deep gratitude to the Reverend Kate Lohr and the fellowship for being such a loving second family to her. We also thank you for the compassion and care you gave her and us during her illness and her death. He went on to say, obviously, the border with the U.S. is closed for now, but I look forward to the day the kids and I will be able to visit Port Townsend again and sit in the QUF sanctuary on a Sunday morning. Ross, please know that our hearts are with you and your family on this sad anniversary, and that we, like you, can't wait for that border to open. We love and miss you and can't wait to see you and the kids. We light a candle of sorrow for Terry Tees, who broke her wrist last week and had to have surgery on it this past Friday. Terry, you are so kind and compassionate to everyone, human and non-human alike. Thus, if there's anything that we can do to be of help to you right now, please just let us know. I hope you're staying on top of the pain and that your wrist heals real soon. And on a happier note, we have a couple of anniversaries to celebrate today. Our first candle of joy is for Brian Rogers and Sherry Maudrow, who celebrated their 41st anniversary last Monday. And the second one is for Audrey and Jim Anderson, who celebrated their 59th wedding anniversary on Wednesday. Happy birthday, Brian and Sherry, and Jim and Audrey. May both of you couples have many more happy years together. And now we light a candle of joy for Elaine Nelson, who turned 75 this past Monday. Her birthday celebration, she tells me, lasted for days, with dinner at Ichikawa with her husband Gary, lunch outdoors at the Spruce Goose with friends, and lots of cards received by so many of you. Elaine asks that I thank all of you who sent birthday wishes, and she hoped that I would convey that she had a thoroughly enjoyable birthday. Happy birthday, Elaine. We now light a candle of gratitude for Kendra Golden, Kate Madsen, and Chris Wilson, the wildly innovative brainchildren of yesterday's pop-up socially distanced book sale. If not for the three of you, we couldn't have had a book sale this year, and there are few views sadder than Unitarian Universalists without fresh book reserves. So thank you, Kendra, Kate, and Chris. And of course, we also light a candle of gratitude for everyone who volunteered at the book sale or who donated or bought books. Your combined efforts made our first gathering a safe, effective, and joyous one. We don't yet have the total amount raised from yesterday, but we'll be sharing it with you shortly. So here's to all of you who helped make our book sale a success. And now we place a final stone, holding in our hearts the joys and sorrows I've just shared, but also thinking of such joys and sorrows among us that are unexpressed, but of no less importance. I invite you now into a moment of silence, which will be followed with a musical response.
This morning's reading is an excerpt from Parker Palmer's book, The Courage to Teach, exploring the inner landscape of a teacher's life. He says, "I'm a teacher at heart, and there are moments in the classroom when I can hardly hold the joy. When my students and I discover uncharted territory to explore, when the pathway out of a thicket opens up before us, when our experience is limited by the lightning life of the mind, then teaching is the finest work I know. But at other moments, the classroom is so lifeless or painful or confused, and I'm so powerless to do anything about it that my claim to be a teacher seems a transparent scam. Then the enemy is everywhere, in those students from some alien planet, in that subject I thought I knew, and in the personal pathology that keeps me earning my living this way. What a fool I was to imagine that I had mastered this occult art, harder to divine than tea leaves and impossible for mortals to do even passably well. The tangles of teaching have three important sources. The first two are commonplace, but the third and most fundamental is rarely given its due. First, the subject we teach are large and complex as life. Our knowledge of them is always flawed and partial. No matter how we devote ourselves to reading and research, teaching requires a command of content that always eludes our grasp. Second, the students we teach are larger than life and even more complex. To see them clearly and see them whole and respond to them wisely in the moment requires a fusion of Freud and Solomon that few of us achieve. If students and subjects accounted for all the complexities of teaching, our standard ways of coping would do. Keep up with our field as best we can, learn enough techniques to stay ahead of the student psyche. But there's another reason for these complexities. We teach who we are. Teaching, like any human activity, emerges from our inwardness, for better or worse. As I teach, I project the condition of my soul onto my students, my subject, or our way of being together. The entanglements I experience in the classroom are often no more or less than the convulsions of my inner life. Viewed from this angle, teaching holds a mirror to the soul. If I am willing to look in that mirror and not run from what I see, I have a chance to gain knowledge. And knowing myself as crucial to teaching as knowing my students and my subject. Our special music for today is Lean on Me by Bill Withers, performed by John Hanson.
Thank you, John. Now, allow me to introduce our guest speaker for today. Gary Obermeyer grew up in Nebraska, a shy farm boy. Then came college. Inspired by the Beatles, he formed a rock and roll band, and he discovered that he was not so shy on stage. And he earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Education. After graduating, he taught in a school system where union activists encouraged and supported him as he went through the ranks of local, state, and national leadership in the National Education Association. During his years with the association, he learned about organizational development, online communication, and the Northwest. He combined those interests to establish a consultancy called Learning Options in 1986. Then, 21 years later, he met and fell in love with Kate Lohr and committed to support and follow her wherever her ministry might take her. So, Here he is now in Port Townsend and at QUF. Please join me in welcoming Gary Obermeyer.
I invite you to picture me, a 9-year-old farm kid, a 4th grader. I was a bit of a daydreamer in school. One daydream stands out. I'm sitting at my desk imagining how cool it would be if I could drive my desk home at the end of the day. Seems entirely feasible. After all, I already know how to drive our tractors and the Army surplus Jeep that we use around the farm. So let me put this daydream in context. You may already know that I attended a one-room school, Fairview Elementary. But you may not know that from 2nd through 8th grade, I'm the only kid in my class. That's right, just me. So here I am, sitting at my desk, imagining what a convenience a drivable desk would be. You may have noticed I said sitting in and not at my desk. Let me explain. This is an image of desks very much like our desks at Fairview Elementary. I ask you to imagine adding a steering wheel, a windshield, and a convertible top, and of course wheels. In my daydream, when I get to school, I drop the windshield and convertible top and flip the steering wheel to the side to free up the desktop. Pretty cool, huh? Sadly, this amazing invention never got from daydream to drawing board. But that's not important for this story. What's important is that I never once considered not going to school. I like pretty much everything about being at Fairview Elementary. I say pretty much because I don't particularly enjoy recess on those days when we play team sports. You may find it hard to believe, looking at me now, but during my pre-adolescent years, I was small for my age. Much smaller than the 7th, 8th grade boys who were already entering the age of raging testosterone, often behaving more like bullies than sportsmen. Although I must admit, recess likely taught me how to remain calm on the outside while shaking in my boots on the inside. Meanwhile, back in the safety of the classroom, I finish assignments with ease and have lots of time for pursuing personal interests. I read books from our little library at the back of the room, peruse the encyclopedias for fascinating facts, and draw. I do lots of drawing. While in the lower grades, I watch the older kids as they're called up to the front of the room, sit around the teacher's desk, correct each other's papers, and answer questions from the day's assignment, or demonstrate mastery of math skills at the blackboard. By 7th grade, I'm the teacher's aide, meeting with the younger students at the back of the room, mirroring what I had observed at the front of the room. Given this experience, it's not surprising that I would choose to be a teacher, even though my Uncle Lee, my favorite uncle, tried to convince me otherwise. Fast forward to my senior year in high school, Christmas Eve at my maternal grandparents' home. My folks, along with my mom's 5 siblings and their families, pack into Grandma's house. I'm the oldest of 35 cousins, most of whom, especially the younger ones, are sent upstairs while the adults play card games at the dining room table. We older cousins are allowed to stay downstairs. So here I am, watching my aunts and uncles play pinochle when Uncle Lee turns to me and asks about my college plans. I say, "Oh, I'll probably be a teacher." To which he replies, "Oh, no, you don't want to do that. Anyone can be a teacher. Besides, you'll never make any money." I know that Uncle Lee's right about the latter point. No one goes into teaching for the money. But I'm not so sure about the other point. Can anyone be a teacher? Can I? As a starting point, good teaching requires courage and integrity, as reflected in today's reading from Parker Palmer. I have a head start on that count, thanks to the influence of my parents, both courageous, authentic, and honest people. On my first day in the classroom, I understand that teacher training isn't sufficient to make a teacher. One becomes a teacher over time through the experience of working with students. My path to becoming a teacher began in 1968. I'm in western Nebraska, driving 80 miles a day, teaching art in 3 small high schools, in classrooms with few supplies, no sink, and no running water. 1968 was the first year that all high schools in the state were required to offer art, but with no standards set for the facilities needed. Teaching under these conditions limits the art projects we can do, but I like the kids, enjoy teaching, and appreciate my colleagues. But I also witnessed problems. In my very first year of teaching, one of our colleagues is fired. A very good teacher who loves teaching and loves her kids. None of that matters. It's common knowledge that she was losing her job because the Board of Education does not approve of her live-in boyfriend. I was angry and probably predisposed to that reaction because of my own mother's experience as a teacher. She was terminated at the end of her first year. The reason? Me. Back in 1946, in rural Nebraska, pregnant women were summarily dismissed from teaching, and mothers were hard-pressed to even find a teaching job. Just 3 years into my path to becoming a teacher, 1971, and I find myself questioning my choice. Should I have taken Uncle Lee's advice? Or is it just that this place is not a good fit for who I am? For students of history and those who lived through the Vietnam era, you'll recall that 1971 was the year the draft lottery was initiated. As luck would have it, I ended up with a very high lottery number. So my fears of being forced to fight in an unjust and unjustifiable war vanish. My first wife and I, both teachers, give up our jobs, move to Lincoln, sign up for classes at the university, and begin to consider other career options. Long story short, my first call for an interview comes from the principal at Seward Junior High, 30 miles west of Lincoln. He's looking for an art teacher. I get the job and soon discovered that the Seward Education Association is a strong and active local with teacher leaders not at all intimidated by power or bullies. Right away, several of the veterans take me under their wings, recruit me for the bargaining team, urge me to run for local president, and nominate me to serve on the Instruction and Professional Development Commission for the Nebraska State Education Association, NSEA. With their support and encouragement, within 3 years, I'm elected to the NSEA Board of Directors, and 3 years after that, I'm NSEA President. Reflecting back on my days at Fairview Elementary, I don't recall ever daydreaming about being NSEA President, but here I am. An interesting thing is happening. Through union work, I'm finding my voice. At the same time, the more active I become, the more troubled I am, seeing excellent teachers not using their own voices, afraid to speak up for fear of retaliation. This nagging reality pushed me, or perhaps more accurately, guided me, to leadership roles at the national level, ultimately as a member of the Executive Committee of the National Education Association, NEA. So it's now August 1980. I'm on the Executive Committee, stepping into the middle of an ongoing debate about the role and purpose of our union. Is our priority to protect, or do we ultimately build greater collective strength for the teaching profession through empowerment? Want to guess which side I'm on? Let's continue the story. You'll soon know the answer. NEA Executive Committee members have a number of responsibilities requiring lots of travel. I find myself on the road about 60% of the time, sometimes more than 2 weeks at a stretch. I use much of that time for outside reading. Among the many books, I'd like to mention 3. The first is School Teacher by Dan Lordy. At the time, he was professor of education at the University of Chicago. The most famous of his books, this one, presents a social portrait of the teaching profession. Lordy describes the overt and subliminal messages that cause teachers to view their work as less than a profession. I'm sure you've heard the refrain, those who can't, teach. School teachers explains why so many teachers, when asked about their profession, often respond, I'm just a teacher. Change Masters by Rosabeth Moss Cantor. At the time of this writing, she was a professor at Harvard University's Business School, researching innovation and entrepreneurship in the corporate sector. From her book, I learned that workers in cellular organizations with limited control over resources and working conditions tend to feel powerless. At the time I'm teaching, schools are about as cellular as you can get, with teachers in separate classrooms and little or no time for professional development or collaboration. The Essential Deming is an account of W. Edwards Deming's work. Deming is considered to be the father of total quality management. He championed the idea of giving teams of workers the tools and training to analyze their effectiveness and make adjustments based on their data. His research inspired the establishment of quality circles in Japan, a practice that transformed their industrial output from cheap to high-quality products. In reading Deming and his disciples, I learned that when workers raise questions and examine their effectiveness, the questions get deeper and the power of the group grows. Seemed to me it ought to apply to teachers as well. Taken together, these three authors, Lordy, Cantor, and Deming, help me understand why even excellent teachers can feel powerless and disinclined to speak truth to power, and importantly, suggest what can be done about it. These three books represent the intellectual underpinning that informed my leadership path. A path that includes lots of time on airplanes, hanging out at 35,000 feet with perfect strangers, often engaging in conversation and amazed at how many ex-teachers I'm meeting. I find eagerness to share post-classroom experiences and notice a pattern in their stories. Almost as if following a script, they mention the benefits they now enjoy and almost always include a comment like, in many ways, I'm really still a teacher. These conversations lead me to a theory. If teachers understood the value and transferability of their skills, they'd be less inclined to apply, I'm just a teacher. If teachers knew they had career options, they would feel less trapped. And if with this knowledge they choose to remain in the classroom, they would be less likely to accept suboptimal working conditions. So here I am, daydreaming mode. Only this time, unlike that drivable desk, my imagining becomes reality. Drawing from the literature on career development and assertiveness training, I offered the workshop several times and received very positive feedback. But my workshop was also a red flag to those who viewed protecting members as our prime directive. In one case, I'm even cornered by an NEA officer at an after-meeting social event. He was literally yelling in my face, accusing me of undermining the union and questioning why I was encouraging teachers, our members, to leave the profession. Suddenly, I'm feeling like I'm on the playground at Fairview Elementary, facing an 8th grade bully. But I remain calm, recognizing that this moment calls for courage and integrity. Fact is, incentives for teachers to leave the classroom are already built into the system. Traditionally, classroom teaching has been a career where the first year looks very much like the last. Career advancement is almost always meant leaving the classroom, and once out of the classroom, often having the power to prescribe classroom practices for those left behind. This sets up a negative feedback loop where the left-behind classroom teachers have less room for professional judgment and more incentive to leave the classroom. To make matters worse, the politically motivated report, A Nation at Risk, was released. It gives credence to assertions that America's public schools are failing and the primary responsibility for the U.S. lagging behind Japan and Germany. A Nation at Risk touched off a wave of reforms built on the assumption that teacher effectiveness, or lack thereof, was the main cause of what was referred to as a rising tide of mediocrity. This inspired, among other things, a push for teacher-proof curriculum, calls to script classroom instruction and reduce the teacher's role to following the script. Under these conditions, Uncle Lee would have been validated. Anyone can be a teacher if it's defined as simply reading from a script. Inspired by A Nation at Risk, legislation is passed in a number of states requiring standardized tests to rank teacher competence, which, by the way, makes about as much sense as ranking doctors based on blood pressure data. Some proponents of this approach, including a former U.S. Secretary of Education, argued for removing 5% of the worst teachers annually based on the test scores of their students, literally believing that schools could fire their way to competent and committed workforce. W. Edwards Deming, mentioned earlier, concluded through his research that 90 to 95% of an organization's effectiveness can be attributed to the system itself. Thus, the best way to improve education outcomes is to improve the system. At the time I'm reading Deming, I'm noticing that more and more of my NEA peers are also paying attention to the likes of Deming. Along with this awareness comes a change in policy arguments, a shift from merely helping NEA members cope with the stress of the system, but to build capacity of the state and local affiliates to participate in transforming it. It's now 1982 when I experienced the most profound, life-changing event of my time at NEA. It may sound trivial, but I was introduced to RBBS, an acronym for Remote Bulletin Board System. It's software designed for personal computers that allows the user to log in and post a message that can be viewed by others who log in later. Sounds quite different from today, huh? I'm invited by the NEA Director of Professional Development to see his latest experiment. He knows of my interest in technology. RBBS can only manage 2 simultaneous users and only through dial-up. This is way before the internet was available to schools or the public. The moment I see the amber text displaying on the otherwise dark screen, I'm instantly in daydreaming mode, imagining teachers networking around shared interests and questions. Intuitively, I see the potential for flattening education hierarchy. I proposed to the Executive Committee that we ask NEA staff to explore the idea of developing an interactive membership file that would facilitate networking among our members. They would have the option to post a profile, and having done that, search other profiles, kind of like Match.com, but without the photos. Turns out I don't have the votes to pursue the idea, but an interesting thing happens. When I'm out in the field, local union leaders get it right away, probably more keenly aware of the isolation teachers are feeling. I know at this point that my future work would include networking innovative teachers. I'm also paying attention to another emerging reform, applying the tools of organizational development and site-based decision-making to empower school staff. I notice that a high concentration of these initiatives are based in the Northwest. A very fortunate coincidence, since I've already been thinking about moving to Portland at the end of my term in office. So again, I'm in daydreaming mode, this time with a grand theory that networking schools engaged in effective and robust continuous improvement offer leverage points to contribute to decentralizing education decision-making, thus creating more room for professional growth at the classroom level. I call it Growing into Schools of the Future, a plan for transforming the education system. During my last couple of years on the committee, NEA initiated a number of programs in support of school-based school improvement and positive labor management collaboration. At the end of my 2 terms on the committee, I moved to Portland and established a consultancy that I call Learning Options. NEA becomes one of my clients, and I end up supporting a series of their reform initiatives for the next couple decades. In this role, I am a teacher. I'm also still a daydreamer and a cheerleader for all the daydreamers in our schools, teachers, parents, and students, who are currently playing defense against efforts to privatize public education and now also facing the pandemic. We're fortunate to live in a state with strong, innovative education employee unions helping their members meet the challenges. Before I leave you this morning, I want to share another story about my Uncle Lee, the one who tried to talk me out of becoming a teacher. Turns out he followed my career. I assume primarily through the conversations and newspaper clippings that my mom shared with him over the years. I know this because of what one of Uncle Lee's sons shared with me at my uncle's funeral. According to my cousin, my Uncle Lee often told them how glad he was that I didn't take his advice. Oh, and one more thing. Remember that drivable desk back at Fairview Elementary that I never got? Well, the car I drive now is not much bigger than that desk would have been. Although my friends enjoy making fun of how small it looks from the outside, there's room enough inside for a good many of the books that guided me through my path from Fairview to NEA. And by the way, daydreamers are welcome in the passenger seat. Let us join voices now in the closing hymn, Come and Go With Me to That Land.
Please join in. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
It's just about time to extinguish our chalice, but before we do so, let me remind you that Kate Lohr will be in the pulpit next Sunday for our Staying at Homecoming service entitled Each New Day. It will be an uplifting message, and the service will include the information you need to participate in the many fall opportunities awaiting you. I hope you can join us. Now, I invite you to join in our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish our flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. After the service, I hope you'll join us for our virtual coffee hour. But first, let us turn our attention to John Hanson, who will now play our postlude, Everything I Love, by Cole Porter.